who's going to go home here between our two players. Now, we do have somewhat of a David and Goliath, as they described over at the news desk, with Shota Yasooka being the Goliath in this particular case, the Hall of Famer from Japan, playing against Noriyuki Mori, far less experienced at the highest levels when compared to his compatriot here, Shota Yasooka. But it's all evened up here. Let us see now who gets to go home and who gets to continue on with their tournament. It's all on the line this very round in our lowers.
Yeah, and I would imagine that just kind of taking a look at the way Noriyuki built his deck was really targeting aggressive decks, if you take a look, because this is a little spin on what we've seen in the past. We've seen mono green food, and it was a very solid deck. The problem was you saw it kind of get cycled out as you saw all these decks that could go over the top with cards like Alrund's Epiphany and Sultai Ultimatum. So, excuse me, Immersion Ultimatum. So Noriyuki Mori really wanted to play against creature decks, and I think just the way that the cards line up, this is going to be tough for him. He's able to get some card advantage here with Gilded Goose and Trail of Crumbs, but he really simply just doesn't have an answer for the card Immersion Ultimatum.
Boy, leaving home without any way to interact there, we've seen hand disruption out of black. Of course, a lot of counter spells are seeing play right now in standard from blue, and Mori just says, don't need it. And we're going to see if that plan works out for him here. And so far, not so much. That was turn 2 Wolfwillow Haven into Binding of Old Gods, which is kind of the dream for this Sultai deck. It really does want to play a 2-drop Accelerant into Binding, just because now that turbos you forward and gets you ever closer to being able to resolve their Emergent Ultimatum. And in this particular matchup, that's the name of the game. It is a race, basically, for Yasooka to make sure that he can stay alive long enough to do so. And he is well underway. He's already got it in his hand. And he's even ramping further with a little twist here, Paul. Midnight Clock from Shota has a lot of text on it, but perhaps most importantly here, it taps that blue.
Yeah, and I mean, Shota's always got to have a little bit something up his sleeve when he plays with these decks. And, Midnight Clock, in maybe perhaps slower, grindier matchups, it's a way to ramp that also kind of refills your hand. So, I mean, again, I mean, take a look at...
He's going to ultimatum here.
He's going to ultimatum here.
Yeah, he actually has the mana.
And Mori had a decent curve, played some creatures, but it didn't really matter.
Not at all. And on an empty board here, basically, Shota gets to go for whatever fireworks he can put down. Sometimes you have to do your ultimatum piles based around what you're facing to answer. In this case, he can just aim for the sky and go for the most powerful possible threats in his deck.
Yeah, and it looks like he's going for Alrund's Epiphany, Gargaroth, and Valki here. Typically, when you don't... typically, you just want to go for the most powerful things. You almost always start with Alrund's Epiphany, because oftentimes you don't want your opponent to... You don't want to give your opponent the ability to take an extra turn, and a few activations from Tibalt is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Now, in this specific matchup, as you can see, he's also considering Kiora, Bind the Gods, and that's also very, very strong here, as honestly, an 8/8 hexproof creature is really difficult for this Gruul deck to deal with.
Yeah, and like you said, he took away the Epiphany, but that leaves Kiorabes the Sea God plus Gargaroth. It's like, here's 14 power, nice green-red deck. What are you going to do against this? He just outdid green-red at what it does best, which is put huge creatures on the battlefield. And, that's not even counting for the fact that we're going to see this Kiorabes the Sea God now lock down all of the non-land permanents, create an attack, and then even steal that Gargaroth or whatever's left over next turn to finish the deal. And in fact, I even spoke too soon. There's an Alrund's Epiphany in hand here, Paul, so it's just over.
Yeah, and this is exactly playing out how you would kind of expect this matchup to go, right? Mori maybe plays a couple of threats, but his deck isn't especially aggressive, and it doesn't have counter magic to deal, or hand disruption, to deal with Emergent Ultimatum. So, yeah, really, really rough matchup here, I feel. And, we're going to take a look at the sideboard to see if he has something else, anything that could help him here. But the problem is, I just don't think that this deck can simply put enough pressure on Shota before Shota gets to cast the ultimatum.
Dude, did you just see what we saw? That was an absolute thrashing by the Hall of Famer Shota Yasooka. My God. I think if I was Noriyuki Mori, I might take a sip of water and kind of reset after that beating. That was, I mean, just to even put insult to injury, he drew another ultimatum on the turn. He was winning the game by a lot. I mean, Shota Yasooka, that was so not remotely close. You really got to hope that Mori has some sideboard tech here that can help him shore up this matchup, because that was absolutely brutal.
Yeah, and as you can see, I mean, there are some pretty good cards coming in. You see the 3 copies of Garrick's Harbinger, which is pretty strong. Hexproof from black means that it can't get Binding the Old Gods. Additionally, you see multiple copies of Roiling Vortex, which is a card that Shota does need to remove prior to casting Immersion Ultimatum, or else he'll be taking 10 damage, because you take 5 damage every time you cast a spell for free with the Roiling Vortex in play.
And there was 3 of those coming in and 1 in the opening hand here, Paul. So not bad. But as you can see, he's going to go for maximum aggression here and put out the 4/3 Garrick's Harbinger. And that thing also has a triggered ability. When it hits, you get to dig through that many cards for creatures and or Garrick spells. And that could keep his hand stocked up. There we see a Bone Crusher Giant going into hand. And it's going to need to be answered sooner than later. It's already got its card back and done 4 damage.
Yeah, no, and this is exactly what you need to do. You need to be as aggressive as possible as the game goes in. If this game goes into the late game, Shota has the clear advantage, and this sideboard strategy of bringing in a bunch of Harbingers and Vortexes is exactly what he needs.
Paul, it's Vortices.
Vortices.
I think. I actually don't know if that's true.
That sounds probably correct.
What if it's wrong and I use that
I really
tone?
hope you're wrong.
It's so
really
brutal
do.
if I go for that hard and then I'm just wrong.
Yeah. Well, actually.
Yeah. You could well actually me. Wow. I've opened myself up here. Land number 3 hits the battlefield here for Mori.
Yeah, and interesting, actually choosing to set up for a Gargaroth here, potentially not playing another creature here. Mori could have just run out a Bone Crusher Giant to apply maximum pressure, but choosing to not play a Giant or even play out the Vortex here, and instead choosing to give himself the option of making a food token here off the Gilded Goose or just running out a Bone Crusher.
Yeah. It looks like a weak turn there for Mori, but it is setting up for the more powerful option down the line here, as not adding to the board counts big time there, but he did get to make a food, and that's going to unlock an additional mana this turn that he wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, and if you take a look at Shota's hand, I mean, it's a little bit slow. He doesn't have an extra land here, so if he wants to develop his board, he's going to have to play that Cultivate that he has in hand, but I don't think he's got the time to do so here. Noriyuki will be putting maximum pressure this turn.
Boy, if you're Shota, you are really hoping to see that untap land off the top of the library. That unlocks Binding Old Gods, and absolutely can get him right back into this game. If he doesn't find it, yeah, he has cards he can cast here. It's not over, but boy, he's in a much worse position.
Yeah, and if you're in Mori's situation, perhaps a card you might be afraid of is a card like Extinction Event, right? Because, you know, if you do choose to just play out a Bone Crusher Giant, that could be a card that you could run into. That could be, you know, a way that Shota can come back here.
Okay, well, Mori didn't actually use up all of the available mana, but went for both halves of Lovestruck Beast, and unfortunately for Shota Yasooka, that was not a land. Now, given time, this hand is basically unbeatable, but as you can see, Mori is not in the business of giving Shota time, and that's going to be a concession, Paul.
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, he can either go for Cultivate there and take 10, or use a Heartless Act and miss his 4th land drop. And if you just see how the turn's going to sequence out, you are basically, it's just impossible to kind of win from that spot. You're just too far behind. And Mori's going to need a very similar start here. Garrick's Harbinger is an extremely difficult creature for Shota to deal with. But, you know, now that Shota's on the play, he might be able to just kind of ramp his way past
Yeah, that was a super, super sweet beat down there from Mori as he returned the favor.
that card.
Both players with an extremely lopsided victory in their games played thus far. First one to Shota, second one to Noriyuki. And now we're going to get a game 3 decider. But as you mentioned, Paul, being on the play could be very important here for Shota.
Yeah, absolutely. And much better hand, got some lands, got an Omen, and then you have one of the few answers that you have in the Extinction event to a potential Garrick's Harbinger.
Yeah, he's going to be digging for Binding the Old Gods if he can find it. But in the meantime, he does have that Extinction event, as you mentioned, Paul, so he's got his insurance plan. Currently, turn 2 is set to be that Omen of the Sea.
And Noriyuki with a pair of Vortices. I'm just going to go with you here. And
I win.
So that would be something that Shota will have to fight through. But outside of that, Shota also plays a ton of Greater Gargaroths, Elder Gargaroths, excuse me, in the main. So there could be instances where he doesn't even need to worry about it too much. Might see bottom. Okay. Oh, and that was a big draw here from Shota. Cultivate just in time here to allow him to continue ramping, and this is going to set him up very, very well for future turns. Meanwhile, on Noriyuki's side, not a lot of pressure still, right? I mean, we're looking at turn 3 here. This is just 1 damage coming into Shota, and once Shota untaps, he's going to have a ton of options available to him.
We see the Garrick's Harbinger here. Ooh, and there's Coma. You were talking about the ramp possibilities leading to a payoff here, Paul, and he's found one of the better ones in his deck.
Oh, and this Extinction event is brutal.
Good God, it's going to leave him with just the 1/1 token left over. And the lands continue to flow here for Shota Yasooka. Back to you, Noriyuki. And Noriyuki is the one who has to continue to apply pressure to Shota. If he steps off the gas for even a minute here, Shota's going to be able to just take over.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to see a Lovestruck Beast here. And Noriyuki at this point is just kind of hoping that Shota isn't just working with a whole lot. But the thing is, I mean, take a look at Shota's hand. I mean, Coma is just such a difficult card for this Gruul food deck to deal with.
It is a beating.
On top of that, Shota has a Balagad Recovery in hand, so he can use that to get back an Extinction event that he has in his graveyard, which would actually completely slow down what Noriyuki may be trying to do with the Lovestruck Beast that's in play, followed by the additional one that he has in hand.
Yeah, it looks like Shota's going to be tricky here. He's going to put Yorion into hand, leave up Disdainful Stroke, and pass. This would allow him the most number of options. He could just slam Coma next turn, or if he wanted with the Extinction event, he could even cast Balagad Recovery and cast it in the same turn where, Mori may walk into it.
Yeah, and if you're Mori, this is the turn, right? You see Shota has 6 lands in play. This might be the turn to just go double Vortex, right?
Yes.
And this makes it so that if Shota does have a card like Emergent Ultimatum, he can't cast it. He's going to die if he does. So this at least shuts down that angle of attack while also putting some pressure, right? This is going to deal 2 damage a turn to Shota every turn.
This was a disaster from Shota's perspective. It doesn't mean he's going to lose the game, but he didn't get to find a target for his Disdainful Stroke, and Extinction event won't deal with the Roiling Vortices. So he's in a real pinch now, as those cards are going to be very, very annoying. Now, Coma can do some pretty good work. It'll stabilize the ground and perhaps give him a clock fast enough to race those enchantments, but perhaps not also. This is a real problem.
Yeah, so what you're going to see from Shota, at least with what he has in his hand, pretty likely that he's just going to play a land and just jam the Coma. He will be tapped out, so that leaves him vulnerable to Embercleave, but of course, Coma also has two abilities. One of which is sacrifice a 3/3 to tap an opposing creature. So to respect the Embercleave, you're probably going to see Shota sacrifice a 3/3 to tap a Lovestruck Beast to prevent himself from getting Embercleaved. Because once he gets to untap, if he gets to untap fairly safely, then the Coma could potentially just take over the game by itself.
Yeah, and it is a quick clock. You know, it does create those serpents on every player's turn, so you're getting 2 of them per turn cycle, and perhaps it could just race the enchantments there. So here we go. Coma Cosmo Serpent's going to hit the battlefield now. There it comes. As he passes the turn back, he's going to get the 3/3 Serpent. But as you mentioned, the card that comes to mind here, if you're sitting in Shota's seat, is going to be Embercleave.
Now, Noriyuki might end up just kind of trying to go down the path of just burning Shota out potentially, right? We've got a Clothis in his hand, right? And that in conjunction with the 2 Vortices that's in play, that's 4 damage a turn. And Shota's at 10.
This is going to be a very close one here. And I'll remind you that one of the players playing in this game is ending their tournament with this game. We're in the lower bracket here. No more room for error from either player. Noriyuki Mori looking to knock off Shota Yasooka, somebody who he's sure to be familiar with, as Shota's a giant of Japanese Magic and the game in general, as a Hall of Famer, and somebody who's had success at basically every level. Mori, though, looking to make his mark here by perhaps slaying the giant and advancing in the tournament. Here comes Clothis, God of Destiny, and it looks like he's on that plan that you described, Paul.
Yeah, he's on. It looks like he's going to go with the drain plan here. Although you have to be mindful. I mean, the Roiling Vortex goes both ways, and that Coma can kill you very, very quickly. You're getting a 3/3 on each player's upkeep.
That's right. It adds up real fast. We're going to see Gilded Goose here. You know, it could come down to a food token getting sacrificed. Down to 8 goes Shota Yasooka.
And Shota doesn't have too many other options here. You're probably going to see him play Yorion, flicker the Omen of the Sea, and his Coma. Get in for 6, and yeah, I mean,
it's a race.
We're kind of in a racing situation, but I have to say I think I might favor Shota's side here. We just got in for 6, and we're about to play a 4/5 flyer to go on top of that with an Omen of the Sea to give you a few more options. And he's got Disdainful Stroke to counter the Embercleave that Noriyuki Mori has in hand.
That's a game changer because it allows him to keep some of those serpents around to apply pressure to the life total of Mori rather than having to sacrifice them just to play around Embercleave.
Shota thinking about any potential 3-mana spells that he might have in his deck to decide whether or not he wants to play the Temple. I think I would just play a 3rd land untapped because the Omen's going to come back into play, and if you don't counter anything, you can just sack the Omen.
He ended up going for the scry. He scryed to the bottom and then double scryed to the bottom. Let's see if he finds anything relevant here. No, it's just another swamp, but the card in hand is Disdainful Stroke. That could be relevant here, and we see triggers going on the stack. Another serpent hits the battlefield, and then bing, bing, down to 7.
Yeah,
goes
so if
Mori.
If Yorion attacks, that'll put Mori down to 3. And then the Vortex activations on the following turn will put him down to 1. The question is, can Shota find a way to get through the other points of damage here to close this out? Shota's going to go down to 4 on his upkeep. And then the Clothis will put him down to 2.
And he has to win that turn, or
You're right. That's right.
probably can't do anything. The Roiling Vortex, if there's mana available for Mori, can prevent Shota from being able to gain life if there was any way to do so. I don't even think there is. Is there a line of play with the Balaged recovery and the
Extinction event. Well, the thing
extinction
is, if you
event?
name odd, that's even worse for you because you have the Coma and the Yorion in play. You can name even, but that's a wash.
And you lose your token, so that doesn't do it. Ooh, this
Well,
is a real close
so what
one.
you can do, what you can do is sacrifice your tokens to tap down anything that has an odd converted mana cost, and then extinction event for even, and then
Okay.
attack for lethal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I think that's the line that we're going to be looking at here, and that would allow Shota to attack in for 10, and even
Now,
if Noriyuki,
food?
right? So Noriyuki on his upkeep though can sack 2 of those food that he has in play.
With the trigger, with the lethal vortex triggers on the stack? Good God.
Potentially, well, so he's got to sack at least 1 of the food on his turn, right, to survive the attack here from the Coma. So we go tap tap on the 2 odd creatures, extinction event for even, attack for 10. Noriyuki sacks a food up to 12, goes down to 2. Vortex trigger on the stack goes up to 5, then goes down to 3.
It's about as close as they get here. And it's an elimination situation. You got to be feeling for Mori, who's facing down just a titan of magic, looking to get by him. And it just feels like Shota is going to have an advantage in making sure he gives himself the best chance to win here.
Yeah, because Shota's going to go down to... Are we on... I'm trying to figure out where we are right now.
This looks like...
Okay,
that was the end step of Mori. Now we're on Shota's upkeep.
So if Shota can't actually kill him here, will he be dead? Does he need to scry on upkeep?
Yeah, it does look like it, right?
Right, because he's going to go down to 4 here. Then he's going to go down to 2 on his next upkeep if he can't kill him. And also keep in mind that there's a trigger that you're going to get out of the Clothis that's in play.
Right. And that's enough.
So he might need to scry here to perhaps just look for a spot removal spell potentially.
Wow. This is so insanely close. Right now, the trigger on the stack is from Coma. Okay, he gets the 3rd Serpent.
And I don't think Shota has any life gain effects, and even if he did, Roiling Vortex prevents that as well if you pay 1 red.
He didn't scry, he drew his card. It was a forest.
Is Mori gonna get this?
It it really feels like it. So Shota is going to start trying to get some creatures out of the way here. The first Serpent to get sacked is the one that was freshest to the board.
So yeah, I mean, even if he goes with the line of sack tap the beast, and Balaged recovery extinction event, again, I mean, Noriyuki can sack the food to survive.
Right, because he would name even, he would lose the other 2 tokens anyway, or the other token that's left anyway, attack for 10, but Mori would be at 12. Then on his upkeep, he sacrifices the other food. I mean, it's about as close as you can get.
Oh, you can, okay.
Is he targeting a land with that?
I think so. Mori's like, what is happening? I mean, you float a red and kind of see what Shota does next. I'm sure he's extremely confused here.
Maybe he's just trying to throw him a curveball.
To like, hey, I'm gonna prevent life gain. You definitely don't want to do that because you'll just die. Is he gonna use? Wait, does that affect both players or just the opponents?
No,
creatures?
only opponents. It only affects opponents. So, so that's fine. And he still has the 2 mana left over to sacrifice the food, which is what's critical here.
Yeah,
because he is setting up for a lethal attack, but the food.
The food is going to keep him alive.
It is. That is the difference maker here. The Gilded Goose has left behind a couple of food tokens. And even though this is an attack for 10 with Mori at 9, he can simply go back up to 12.
Oh my
here,
goodness.
take the full hit. And he has lethal lined up on board, right? He just has.
He doesn't even have to do anything. He just has to
plus the 2 royal. Yeah.
He just has to remember to sacrifice his food on his upkeep before dying to the vortex. Wow.
Incredible stuff. This is as close as it can possibly get as we see the triggers go on the stack.
Just sack the food. That's all you got to do.
And there it is. The food gets sacrificed. Back up to 5 goes Mori. He'll take 2 down to 3. But as we know, there's no way for Shota to get through. Incredible.
Oh my. Oh,
there's a Bone Crusher Giant, which is
damage.
Just a little bit of insurance policy, but this is all that needs to happen. Down to 2, and we're going to see triggers here. There's even a Bone Crusher, and Noriyuki Mori has the victory lined up against Shota Yasooka, and in fact, he is going to dispatch him from the tournament, and Mori is going to survive. Shota is going to be eliminated by his countryman, the relative newcomer, Noriyuki Mori. Incredible.
Yeah, and Mori, I mean, he sees it. He knows he's got it, but he's wondering whether or not he should use this stomp. He's like, or just allow Shota to die or respond to those vortex triggers on the stack.
Right, once those triggers go on, there it is. This is Shota's upkeep.
Yeah, and that's going to be it.
Man, Klothys, this indirect damage plan working so well here for Mori. And look at this, with this on the stack, it's going to be just a scry. And you see Mori says, but I've got, no matter what you do, I have Bone Crusher Giant as well.
Yeah, and if you think about it,
Shota's going to use that on there and give the good game. He wishes he could turn off those roiling vortex, but he can't. And that is enough for lethal. Noriyuki Mori defeats Shota Yasooka and advances. That's going to be the end of the road for Shota.
Yeah. Wow. What a way to close it out. The double vortex there on that turn when it looked like Shota was everything was lining up for Shota. But the thing is, his sideboard plan here, Noriyuki's sideboard plan of a bunch of cheap threats that don't die to spot removal ended up paying off huge, right?